Hello everybody and welcome. I want to do a quick overview on Project 1. This is primarily for the summer class. This is a pretty informal video I'm going to make here today. I'm not going to do much editing. I don't really have a script, but I just want to go over my thoughts on it and show you a couple examples. So please excuse any pauses or hesitations. I just want to spend a quick amount of time going over this. Now, I also want to point out that this video does not replace the rubric. You still want to make sure you read this full rubric and have a really good understanding of it before going forward. I'm just going to try to give some tips here. Another thing I want to point out too is that with the projects, unlike the Xilabs, you pretty much have one shot to submit these. You don't get the benefit of being able to upload the Xilab multiple times until you get 100. So that's why it's very important, I think, to pay attention to these rubrics, because you kind of have one chance to get it right. Now in this case, you actually will have a second chance to turn it in after the feedback. So let me first talk a little bit about the 3 deliverables. So right now, if you go into the Assignments tab, you will see we have Project 1 here. And there are 3 deliverables. Now each of these 3 deliverables are going to end up being worth like 33% of the overall 100% Project 1 grade. So the grades for each deliverable will essentially be averaged together to formulate your final grade. So the first deliverable is going to be your research in wireframe, and I'll talk about that shortly. That's the one that's going to be due pretty soon, actually. That's because we want you to get started on this and have a good foundation. Then I'm going to give you guys a bit more time to actually hand in the structure and the style. This is essentially the complete website. These are tentative due dates, but I think these two are pretty close to when I need to have them due, given that we have a pretty short semester. And what I'm doing unique about this project is you'll have a final chance to fix any issues. So this one should really be your complete website, doing as best as you can. But as a sort of second chance, because lots of times people miss little things and it can be frustrating, I'm allowing people to submit a final time a week later. So for example, if you maybe get 100 here on the first deliverable, but then maybe you mess some things up here on the actual website, maybe you get an 80 here, you'll have a chance to correct those issues. I'll get you guys the feedback really quick on those, hopefully within like a day or two after you submit it, and you'll have a chance to submit it here. So if you got something like 180 and now got 100 here, your overall grade on Project 1 would then be calculated as 100, which is a pretty good grade. Excuse me, actually it would be a 90. So the 100, the 80, and the 100 would end up being a 90, I believe. So let's first talk about the first deliverable, which is due, I believe, on the 20th. This is the research and wireframe deliverable. Now, you might be asking, well, why do we do online research? Isn't this a web class? It turns out this is the first class that many people take getting into RET. Now, I know this is different for many of the people over the summer, but this is a good chance to kind of hone some of those skills that are involved in web development but are kind of beyond the technology itself. Now, typically in the past we used to have the students conduct research based on this week's topic on a completely different topic than what you would actually do for Project 1. But I felt like that didn't make too much sense, so instead what you're going to do for your research homework is research what you want to do for your actual project. So this way you get kind of 2 things done. Instead of having to do it 2 times, you only have to do it once. Okay, so as you see, this first one, you need to hand in the research in wireframe. Now, this deliverable shouldn't be too bad. The research is sort of like a research paper, if you've ever done one of those, which I imagine most of you have. And the wireframe portion is going to be very similar to what we did last week's homework, except this time I'll want you to submit probably 2 wireframes at a minimum, one for mobile size and one for desktop size. Now I know I'm jumping around here a bit. Maybe I should start here on the research, and then I'll come back and talk about the wireframe a bit more. Okay, So these are the 4 kind of suggested topics. Now, honestly, I'm pretty all right with you choosing any topic. The only issue I see people sometimes doing is that they'll sometimes pick a self-proposed topic that would be much better for the next project. So for the next project, I'm going to have you guys do a web page on pretty much whatever you want, but you're going to be trying to promote something. So if you're really wanting to make a website, for your parents' business or for your personal business, yes, that's a great idea, but you would probably be better off holding off on that until the next project, okay? So this project, we really want you to just choose sort of a current event or something that you can research. And the challenge here, and what this kind of mimics, is that oftentimes when you're building a website, you might be presented with a lot of material. A company might have existing materials. There's a whole plethora of information out there, but you need to sort of condense that and actually turn it into a website, okay? So you wouldn't want to necessarily link to just a huge PDF with hundreds of pages. You want to kind of distill that information into pages, and that can be a challenge. So that's part of the reason why we have you do this, okay? The other reason is because we want the information on your website to be credible. Obviously nowadays, we've all heard about fake news, misleading information. The idea behind this project is, yes, you're going to present a topic, you're going to talk about a topic, but you're going to back it up with this research you're going to do. And this will improve the credibility of your website, okay? So the idea is that the person visiting the website likely isn't going to be an expert in this topic. Maybe they don't want to read 20 research papers on this topic, but they just want to quickly learn about it, but they want to make sure what they're learning is correct and it's credible. This is why we're kind of having you guys do the work of sort of distilling this massive information about your topic into a much smaller, more organized, cohesive website, okay? So we talked a little bit last week in the video that I made about online research, and the idea here is that you're going to basically conduct research on your chosen topic. So if your topic is, let's say, COVID-19, you're probably going to want to spend most of your time at this library.ret.edu. That's kind of what I recommend most students to do their research from, because this will allow you to, if I jump back here, this will allow you to get your sources, but these would also likely count as one of these deep web sources, okay? These are more credible resources you get in this RET library site. They come from databases, journals, and so on. They're not just a random person's rant on a website you know nothing about. So as you see here, you need to have a minimum of 6 references for your research for this, okay? And at least 2 of them need to be from this invisible/deep web. Now, if you're confused about that, you can go back and watch the last video. I'm not going to go too in depth on this, but essentially those would be topics or papers that you maybe get from a physical library or from a book, but they could also be virtual journals, virtual databases, and things like that that you get from the RET library. So this will make your life, I think, a lot easier if you just focus on getting those 2 invisible/deep web sources from here, though you could do it other ways. I'm not saying you can't, okay? The other 4 sources can be from other pages, like just normal websites, but you could also get all 6 of your references just from here. It's really up to you, as long as you get 2 of them from these sort of credible directories like RET library, okay? Now, let's take a look at this a little bit more. What I want you to do here is you can paraphrase, you can use quotes, but I don't want you just copying and pasting an entire research paper and putting that in your PDF that you submit and eventually on your website. The idea here is that you're taking this very broad topic, you're kind of distilling it, you're making it organized in your own manner, okay? So that's a big thing. Definitely don't just do that. Now, I'm not going to grade this super strictly like maybe a technical writing class would do, but when you hand it in, it will go through a Turnitin just to make sure that you didn't just copy and paste this huge block of text. So you can kind of summarize what they're saying, you can paraphrase, and you can take direct quotes. Let's see here. Okay. I also get a lot of questions here about this topic. I know students like to just say, okay, you need to hand in 4 pages. That gives you a nice objective of what you need. The trouble with that is that I can say 3 to 5 pages here in like a Word document or a Google Drive document, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fill up 3 to 5 pages of a website. Okay, so this is kind of like a suggestion. I imagine if you do 3 to 5 pages double spaced of research and maybe some media, that would probably fill up the 4-page requirement that you're going to need. Now, if you want to read more about the actual website requirement, then you're going to want to go to the second deliverable, which I believe I have open here, which goes more into depth. It says you're going to need at least 4 HTML pages in addition to a works cited pages. So you really want to make sure you probably read both of these before you start this. In theory, yes, you could start this without reading this, but it's going to make your life a lot easier, I think, if you read both of these at the same time. Now, I realize I said I would keep this a short video, and I'm already at about 10 minutes, it seems like. So if you have more questions on the research process, please reach out to me on Slack or my office hours, ASAP. I want to talk also about this quickly, and then I'll show you guys a few examples, because I know if I make my videos too long, it's kind of easy to miss things in it. So for the wireframe part, you're going to create 2 wireframes. You're going to create one for mobile and one for desktop. And I strongly suggest you use Figma, though you could use whatever you like. But this is going to be sort of similar to what you did in last week's homework. It's just now you're going to submit 2. Now, we haven't talked tons about mobile design yet. And this is a much more complicated wireframe that I have here. We have a lot going on. We have columns, and I'm not expecting you to do this. For your first project, as you'll see when I show you some demonstrations, you can do a pretty simple linear website. The idea here is just to get practice building a simple site that links 4 pages together. Don't worry about making columns and stuff unless you already have advanced knowledge. But we want to just nail these basics first, because you'll see if we keep our pages pretty simple and not worry about columns and stuff like that, they oftentimes will be naturally responsive without having to do all sorts of modifications to it. Now, for the next project, that's going to be different. We're going to be learning tips on how we can make our site more responsive. We're going to learn new techniques. But for this one, we're not going to really try anything crazy, but we're going to keep it simple, and it should be naturally responsive. So this is what it looks like to have a mobile size one and a desktop size one. Like I said, just kind of ignore that this one, has a lot of columns and stuff, okay? And I believe in Figma that you can create the different size views or different size panels by using this frame. So I could, insert a frame for an iPhone, and I could insert a frame for maybe a desktop here as well. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this, but this will make your life a lot easier. So now you have somewhere to put your wireframe in for your desktop and somewhere for your mobile, okay? So hopefully that's making sense so far. I don't have too much more to say about that, but like I said, I want your wireframe. It doesn't need to be like a high definition wireframe, but the more you do here, the easier your life is going to be when you actually go and build the website, okay? In the past, when we didn't have students do wireframes, they would pretty much just build it on the fly, and I think it just made the overall website not as nice, to be honest, but it also probably made your life a little bit harder, okay? So that is the wireframe deliverable. Once again, when you submit that, you can submit screenshots of it, or you can submit a working, that's the wrong link, you can submit a URL on Figma. Just make sure that I have access to be able to see that Figma. I believe if you click share at the top of Figma, it generates a sharing link, but you might want to test it out in a different browser or incognito window just to make sure I can actually view that. Because I don't have a lot of time to grade these, so I can get you feedback quickly, and that will save some back and forth. Okay, so as you can see down here, this is the point breakdown for the first deliverable. So you've created enough content, you get 40 points. You've used the 6 information sources, that's 20. 2 of those are from the deep web, which, as I mentioned before, are those more credible sources that you can get from RET Library. You can also get those from Google Scholar, I believe, and you can log into the RET Library through Google Scholar. And the other big thing is I want you to make sure those are meeting APA standards. You can look those up online. I show you, I believe, how to get the APA citation from RET Library in that last week's video, if you want to go back and see that. And also providing the wireframes. Now, looking at this now, I see the wireframes are worth only 15 points. Maybe I should bump that up to 20 or 25, just because I know those can be a bit time consuming, okay? And you are going to go ahead and submit that in this Dropbox. Okay, so let's take a look at a few examples of previous work submitted by students in the past. Now these are, I believe, pretty much A-level work, so they're pretty well done, so don't be intimidated. But they'll give you a good example of what I'm looking for, and I'll talk about some things about what I'm looking for while I go through these. And like I said, when you are doing your research, you might want to organize your research by the actual web pages, because it's just going to make your life easier when you go to build these 4 web pages, okay? So for example, when you're doing your research this week, and you're doing your topic on COVID-19 and remote work, maybe you want to make a page on industries, positives, negatives, things like that. The possibilities are really endless here on how you can organize your pages. This is your job to do. And what I'll kind of say somewhat jokingly is there's not really a wrong way to do this. I mean, because it depends on how you think your topic should be organized into 4 pages. But there are sort of wrong ways, I suppose, you can do it. And the wrong way I don't want to see you guys doing it is by making a page called like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Because on the web, that just doesn't make much sense. If I'm trying to browse your site, I want to know what topics and what information is on each page. And by simply just calling this something like page 1 or page 3, that doesn't tell me where those links are taking me to. However, by calling it positives or effects by industry, this gives me a good idea of what these pages are going to be about, okay? Now, let's take a look at a couple more. Like I said, it's hard to just look at one of these and say this is exactly what I want. Some people go a little above and beyond. Some people can have a very beautiful website that looks amazing, but they miss the basic principles I'm looking for and they can do poorly. And then some people can have sort of a very simple website and do very well because they've met the objectives, okay? So you'll see oftentimes on the home, they'll introduce their topic. They'll have some text. And you'll notice the text has been modified. It's not the default text. They've chosen a nice color scheme here. That there's no contrast issues here, so the gray text on the white background is easy to read. They've also added some media here. Now there's no hard rule I can give you and say, oh, you need to have 1 image on each page or 2 images on each page, but generally I'd recommend to have at least 1 piece of media on each page, okay? And they've also broken it up into paragraphs. It's easy to read. Now another thing you could do here, let's see if they do it on this page. Another thing I often like to see is, yes, they have paragraphs of information, but they've used subheadings here to kind of say where the topic might change, okay? And in this case, they've actually used a couple images on each page, and they've broken it up nicely. And they have, looks like they might have used like an H3 to accomplish this. So this is an H3, this is an H3, header, okay? And maybe this is an H2 because this is the overall page name, and maybe this is an H1, okay? Another thing I'm really looking for you guys is to have this menu consistent and this title consistent on all 4 pages, okay? Some people will make the mistake of when you're on your home and you go to a secondary page, this menu will completely disappear and they'll just add a back button. I don't think that makes the site easy to use. You should have your navigation on all 4 pages, okay? So you can easily jump from page to page, okay? And I know I'm jumping around all over here, but this is a preview of the references page. This would be your 5th page, right? You have to have 4 pages of content at a minimum and a references page. You'll notice here they've used the APA citation format here as well, okay? So this is very important. You don't want to lose these easy points. Now this was a really well done one, but you can see a similar idea here. They have a references page. They have 4 pages of content. They've broken the content up and organized it. They've added some media here, okay? And as you can see, when I click between all 4 pages, the main header always stays up here. The navigation stays here, but then the topic changes here. Also make sure when you're doing this, I know I'm throwing a lot of tips out, I hope these don't get buried in the video. When you click a page like this, this was a furry therapy one, and it's not showing me the title here, but you'll notice if I go into the view page source, the title of the page, once again, that's what you put in the head. That's what appears in the tab or the bookmark. They've used both the page name, right? This is the overall topic name, furry therapy, but they've also used the topic of that page. So this page is animal assisted therapy, so they have it in their title. Versus this page is going to have a different title, right? This is another area where you can lose points. And this is important for search engines, things like that. You want to have the name of the overall page, but also the sort of topic of the page. The overall site, maybe I should say. And they do the same thing here. They have the overall site name on every one of the 4 pages, but then they have the actual topic here as well. So if you have questions about that, I can explain that a little bit more in depth. As I mentioned, this is getting more into the second deliverable, and I think maybe I'll put another video out, maybe going over that and going over these tips again. So maybe I'm jumping a little far ahead in this point, but I hope these examples have been helpful to see kind of the things that I'm looking for, okay? As I mentioned before, you know, I'm really looking for a nice, consistent, well-designed, it adheres to those CRAP principles, it has good, credible information, it has a few pictures and videos. Now for the next project, Project 2, we'll get into making a really fancy page with more bells and whistles that looks great on mobile and desktop, whereas this page is more text content, and that's okay. That's kind of the idea. So hopefully this helps. As I mentioned, if you guys have more questions, please set up a meeting with me ASAP. Like I said, this example actually has 2 columns, and I wouldn't worry about trying to do 2 columns just yet. We'll get into that in a later week. So those 2 examples might not have been the best to show you, but these ones are pretty good. You'll see they've used the float property here to float this image to the right. So they actually haven't created 2 columns, they've just used the float to float the image besides the text. And you're more than welcome to do that here as well. That would probably be a good idea. That's not necessarily making it 2 columns, as you can see. So hopefully this helped. If you have any questions, please message me as soon as you can, and hopefully everybody enjoys this project. The nice thing is we've kept it open-ended. In the past it used to be you had to research this, so choose something you're interested in, organize it in a way that you think will help your audience understand it, and make sure and verify that it's credible by adding your works cited. Okay? I'll talk to everybody soon.